Guys, we've got Nate behind the camera. He is about to ask us many questions around what our first ultramarathons were like and what advice we have after having run them. But before that, Morgan, what did you do this weekend?
I just got back from Golden, British Columbia, where I ran the Golden Ultra 55K.
Super casual, and how much elevation gain was that?
Around 11,500 feet.
Yeah, that is an absurd amount of elevation in that distance. Now, Morgan, for you, that wasn't your first, that was your second ultra.
Correct, yes, but the most elevation and the most time on feet for me.
Definitely, so a definite new first in PR there. So I wanted to start by asking both of you, when you first signed up for that race, what was that like when you clicked register and you saw that email confirmation come through?
I'll go first.
Great.
For me, I feel like that is just the most sure first level of commitment. You are just like, I pulled the trigger, it's happening. You then send it out to a bunch of people to make sure you're holding yourself accountable. This is happening, because if you don't share it, no one really knows. That's how I felt. I was excited.
I was really scared because I'm coming from an all-road background. So this was my first trail race in general, which was a 50K. So that was a lot, but I was really excited to take on this new running adventure going onto the trails. So I was looking forward to the training itself.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the training, how did you figure out how to start training for this? Even from how many weeks from the race did you start to get ready? And how did you start to think about, just approaching the week and your long runs?
I think for me, the first thing you have to realize is one huge part of ultramarathons is the lows. So certain mental spots that you hit, those hard points of the race, how often can you mimic those before, during your training? And that's not to say that you're going to be running exact terrain that the course is going to be. You're not going to be running the same mileage. You're not going to be running the same elevation change. What you can do, though, is make workouts or make runs that have hard spots in them. So Morgan and I, we have these beautiful Marin headlands over here in California, and we can use those for hill repeats or finding difficult stairs to run up. But we're not necessarily matching our course, but for my training, just making those hard parts part of it so you get used to getting past them and into the good stuff.
Yeah, definitely the same thing for me. It was my longest distance that I was ever going to run. So for me, also being on my feet for that long, coming from road racing where my marathons were over 3 hours, this was going to take me 5.5+ hours. Especially the one I just did was an 8-hour race, which never done before. So for me, it was making sure that I was definitely getting those back-to-back long runs and making sure that I was running on tired legs, but also knew how to deal with that later, like the mobility and the strength training, keeping my body strong so that I could actually handle that, because it was something I'd never done before.
To piggyback off that too, those back-to-back days are so crucial because whose schedule allows them to have I'm going to go out for an 8-hour practice run today. Those back-to-back days of being able to still get the volume in, but in a schedule that works for you, is so key.
Right, and run and get the experience of running on those tired legs and figuring out what to eat. Was there some flavor of goo or bar that you were really hyped on in the beginning that by the end you're like, I can't eat this thing anymore?
It's hard for me to use goos or gels past that 3-hour mark. Is really difficult. I feel like my body gets to a level of burning that it's just the sugar is just not hitting right anymore. For some of the shorter races, it works in some of the training runs, but after that, I feel like you need more substance, less sugar hit.
Yeah, I use Spring Energy, and that actually worked really well for me because it's a little bit more on the natural side of things. So I had to alternate my flavors, because otherwise, the same thing over and over, I was just not going to happen. But also making sure that I was packing enough for that variety, because 6 hours in, I had no idea what I was going to be wanting. So I had all the varieties on me at all times so that I knew what I wanted.
Yeah, that flavor fatigue is real. All right, let's talk gear, because the things you need in your tool belt as a road runner are a little bit different when you get into the mountains. So what are some of the fun discoveries you guys had from the gear perspective that now you just can't live without?
Well, the first thing was my hiking poles.
Those are like some nunchucks behind your back.
These were pretty key this last race, because once again, training for this amount of elevation gain, the one hill that I had to climb was about 4 miles and 45 degrees elevation. So whew, it was a steep one. So
I saw the photo.
Oh, it was bad. Yeah. These came in so key to help pull me up the hill, and obviously during road races we don't need these. So this was a really weird tool that I had to get used to running with, because I know, Holly, you have them as well, and they're just not a natural thing because your arm swings a little bit different.
It's like a different movement.
Yeah, like I had to work my core a little bit differently, my upper body, but in the end it really saved my lower back and saved my quads hiking up this hill for 3 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider too is with ultramarathons, like you are running throughout the day, so there's different elements and things that you're going to run into, whereas like a shorter race, you can bank on like it's going to be about this temperature, the sun's going to be out, it's going to be this, or it's raining, whatever.
Right. The weather's not necessarily going to change. It's going to be somewhat constant for a shorter race.
But with a longer one, you could be out there for a day, right? So like for my 50 miler, I was in cold conditions, 30, 40, we were running over some snow, but it got hot. By the middle of the day, it was like mid 50s. So I had different layers that were thin, that I could go take on and off that weren't bothering me, and also a headlamp was absolutely key. That was something I wasn't used to in like shorter road races, but you'll need it when the sun's coming up, and then of course if you're out there when the sun's coming down.
That's cool. So let's talk about race day itself, because you have ideas in your brain of what how you think the day's going to go. You have the ideas of what you think could potentially go wrong that you stress about, and then there are the things that actually happen on race day. So pull, one or two kind of things from each of your races that, that happened to you guys.
For me, I will say that, and I don't even know what to compare it to, but that anticipation is so much more stressful than once you're actually in it. So my favorite thing is kind of getting into that first couple hours. You hit that 2 or 3 hour mark, you're like, okay, pressure's off, it's just me outside now, and now I can just like focus on what I'm doing. I'm tired enough at this point that I can't be too stressed anymore. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like all that buildup and like the agony of the day before, and you can't sleep and all that stuff, it drops away, and then you're like just focused on that. I would say once that happens, then you start to register how your body's feeling. All that like adrenaline and stuff is kind of chilling out, and then you're like, how's my stomach feeling today? I have personally been really lucky, knock on wood, with my stomach being pretty secure. Like I feel like my eating plan and everything kind of pans out. I know, Morgan, you haven't been as lucky in that department.
Yeah, I've had some issues in road races. Luckily, this last race went actually really well on the nutrition side, so that was like a yeah.
What did you do in this last race that made it go better than maybe previous events?
Well, to start, I mean,
was it luck of the draw, different food, different timing?
Yeah. Timing, I feel like, is a little different in the trails, obviously, compared to road. I feel like road, because you're kind of going the same motion the whole time, you can just always like randomly take a sip here or like rip out a gel. But when I was climbing that 4-mile hill, I just didn't even want to like eat anything because my heart rate was so high, and like even taking a sip of water was just like a lot of energy and effort at that point because I just couldn't breathe. But this race was different. Yeah, I started using Spring, which I really like. And then they had Scratch on course for the hydration, which I've used before, and it has
the good stuff. Yeah,
that has the real sugar in it, which actually works better for me than something with like a faker sugar in it. So I think that hopefully helped because I definitely had some ups and downs, but I didn't even have to like stop and go to the bathroom. So that was like, whew, pretty good. 8 hours.
Exactly. You're definitely moving at a slower, more gradual speed during the ultramarathon, so you're able to like address things at a more regular pace versus like gotta grab this and adjust. And the other thing I'll say about something that doesn't always go as planned for me is my feet and blisters. I've like bought everything under the sun to get my feet taped up, make sure everything sticks and all of that, but race day, the humidity and like the actual temperature and everything makes a big difference on your feet and how they're feeling that day. So probably around that 3-4 hour mark is where I start to like register, okay, are my feet rubbing a lot today? Are they not? Do I need to like figure something out, switch my socks out? That's one variable that I haven't quite figured out yet.
So what did you ladies learn about pacing in that first race of yours?
For me, I am someone who takes a more conservative approach to a lot of things in general. I have a good feel for like when I'm tired or when I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So I would say that I might have come out a little too easy. That was my first thing. I was
Yeah.
too worried about burning out or getting smoked in the beginning. What you realize is that your body's going to adapt. And like Morgan told me an awesome story she'll tell you guys right now about when it felt impossible and how she got out of that to continue on.
Yeah, so this race this weekend was definitely something out of my comfort zone and out of my knowledge range, I guess, because I had was a little naive going into it, I guess, but it turned out.
How long did you think it would originally take you when you signed up? Because your previous 50K race was in the 5.5 hour range, right? And then how long did this one take?
Just over eight.
Did you think it was going to take up to 8 hours going in?
I really hoped it wouldn't, but
When did you realize that it was going to be closer to like an 8-hour day?
yeah, so the climb, the really steep climb in this was about mile 9-ish to 13. And once I got to the top of 13, we had some little rolling downhills, and we actually got to drop a bag for this, which was really key because I was able to change some headbands, put on some gloves. Because
Yeah,
it
what
got
did you put in
colder.
your bag?
I put 2 extra buffs because I had one around my neck and then one around my ears, and they got like sweaty / just dewy and cold. So that was really nice to change those off. I had an extra pair of socks, but I didn't change them. I probably should have, but I figured if I took my shoes off,
Didn't want to put them back
I
on.
wasn't getting back in
I
there.
had that say, like every time I bring extra socks, the idea of getting into that mess and having to like see what's going on mid-race, that stresses me out. So I
Yeah.
tend to leave that be. But
I felt like a small blister potentially happening, which it did. So I was like, if I take my sock off, like putting a new one on may just like hurt it more. So I didn't. And then I had multiple different fuels in there, and I had another rain jacket just in case, because it did get colder as we went. Obviously, as you go up, it got pretty cold up there. But yeah, once I hadn't really been looking at my watch for time because that climb was just like every 5 steps I was like, it felt like it was a mile.
Yeah.
It was not. And so I think it was about mile like 17, 18-ish is when we got to the aid station. We were allowed to drop our stuff, and actually 2 other girls who I was running with had dropped their bags at the same place, and they had caught up to me, and I looked down at my watch, and we had been out there for 4.5 hours. I was
my
like,
gosh.
the race isn't even halfway over yet. Oh my God, what is gonna happen? I was like, I don't know that I'm prepared for this. But sitting down for just like 2 minutes at the aid station, getting some like drier stuff on, having that like new fuel, like refilling up my bottles and stuff like that. I don't know what happened per se, but it was a lot of downhill swoops. It was on a BMX course, so they had the nice berms, and I just let myself go down the hill and
You just kind of cruise it. I think there's always a question of how much time to spend in aid stations, right? Because you don't want to, the race is on, the clock is going, it's like, oh, I have this urgency to get in and get out, but the day is so long that if you don't use the aid station strategically, you could hurry yourself out and hurt your race in the long run.
Yeah.
You definitely need to use them, but it's also like there's so many during a longer race that you have to like realize that time adds up too. So use them, but like get what you need to get, do what you need to do, take the 2-minute sit, and then move on. If you just hang out at every one, all of a sudden you've spent 30 minutes at each station.
So 2 minutes was kind of a sweet spot?
It's a good
For that one, yeah. I feel like it averaged that. I think when I actually, on Strava, they do your moving time and your
like still time. Yeah,
exactly. I think it said that overall I had 45 minutes worth of stopping, and that might have been like also from that hill as well, where I like had to pull over and like have a mental breakdown because
vomit in your mouth and then keep going.
Luckily none of that. No, I definitely had some moments where I pulled over and like found a tree to lean back against and had to sit there for like 30 seconds because I wasn't actually sure if I was going to be able to take another step, but I knew that the hill was going to come eventually, the top was going to be there, and it did. And all of a sudden, after kind of having a nice little downhill, having some food, water, just I cruised, and like I was showing Holly earlier, like I think 30 people passed me going up the hill, but I did pass them back on the downhill.
Yeah, there we go.
So that road running, and luckily I had been doing some leg turnover.
Yeah, so you felt like you had some speed.
Exactly, and a lot of people who I was actually kind of chatting with out there were very mountain hikers. They're coming from the deep wilderness of Canada, and they're like coming for this race, and that portion of the course they actually weren't strong on. because they are used to very technical terrain. Where luckily we have
what did they fuel on? Like elk jerky and smoked salmon?
Dude, there was a guy out there that had his own bear jerky.
I love it.
Like,
so good.
It's great.
Well, I know you guys aren't done with ultras for the year, and the next thing I want to talk about what you guys got going on next, and what you're going to be putting in place for your training. So what do we have coming up in November? Because you guys are not done of this video.
We're gonna be crossing the bridge right over
Ooh,
there.
all
We're gonna
the way
live
out
look
there.
at our course.
Yeah.
We're doing the North Face Endurance Challenge 50K.
Woo.
This is, I was just telling Morgan, this is kind of like what I feel to be my home race course.
Home race.
Yeah.
I started with the half marathon. Did the marathon up to the 50K. This will be like third time doing the 50K there. There's about 6,500 feet of elevation gain, I think, in the course now.
Yeah, that sounds right. For the new one. I'm super excited.
Is the race sold out, or
the 50K is sold
bummer!
out.
I'd totally sign up for it.
I'm sure we could get you a spot.
Right?
I'm excited because last year unfortunately did get canceled with the wildfires, so I had to choose a different race, and I loved training on this course because, well, it is in our backyard.
Home court advantage.
Exactly.
Home court.
It is a very runnable 50K, which it's a lot of swooping hills. There are some.
I feel like anything
wrong
after
hills.
what you just did is going to be runnable.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little bit.
And it's like Morgan was saying, it's not super technical. A few pieces are, but not really. So it's runnable. You're not stepping over huge like tree roots and branches and rocks. So you can just focus on actually running it, which is nice. It's also pretty uncovered. Like, it's going to be sunny. If it's sunny that day, it will be sunny most of the day.
Yeah, we'll be pretty warm out there. So
Makes
that's
sense.
also something that we'll have to take into consideration in November.
Yeah. So ultras are always an experience to learn something, whether that is a potential mistake you made before, either in training or on race day. What is, one thing that you're going to think about in both your training or your race coming up that you maybe want to make sure that you avoid based on previous experience?
Ooh, I don't know if there's something.
Like,
I don't know if there's anything that I would want
I did too many long runs in my preparation because I was nervous about that, or I didn't rest enough, I was cooked, or I didn't do enough strength. I know that's not necessarily your ladies' problems.
I definitely feel like, and Morgan and I talked about this before, is it appropriate to, or how much use of the course map should you make? Like, should you get super hyper focused on how the course is, how fast you should run, like where the elevation gain is, or should you just let it be what it is on race day? And I feel like finding that blend, I haven't quite found it, and I could say that that's been a mistake in the past of not knowing what to expect. And then those hard parts come up and you're like kind of taken aback.
Don't mind our finest Coast Guard trapper going through on this beautiful day. Guys, how warm is it right now, just as an aside?
Yeah, probably like about.
We're just starting to get a
approaching
breeze, but this is like
It's
as
been a
warm as
hot
it gets
day.
in San Francisco.
It's a
My
hot day.
goodness.
But yeah, so it's like, do you get super hyper focused on where the hills are, or do you just let it surprise you that day? And I think like,
and be super strategic about the course,
There's
like you know when you're
fine
gonna
line.
attack
do you
it.
want to know when the hard parts are coming, or do you want to just know that at some point there's going to be 6,500 elevation gain across the board? Like,
It's gonna happen.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too. For North Face, I trained on it all last year because it is right there. So I feel like I actually know the course pretty well, which being a runnable course I think is okay. For the Golden Ultra I just ran, I knew when the hills were going to be. I knew that it was going to be steep and long. I didn't exactly know, at 9 point whatever to 13 point whatever, it's going to be this hill.
There's a difference between knowing it on paper and knowing it with your feet.
Very different.
But also, I think if I knew exactly, I would have just been consistently looking at my watch, being like, "Oh my God, I have this much time left. I have this much
Which
time."
is stressful too.
Well, that was like too much. So I knew it was going to be hard. I knew what to do going into it to train best I could. But yeah, I totally agree. At least looking at the map and knowing what it's going to be like, because that's the only way that you're going to know what runs to do, what kind of training that you're going to also need to be adding in. Like for me personally, I had to add in a lot of stair climber because we don't have super steep terrain here.
Yeah.
So I just needed that climbing leg, especially after coming off of road running season.
So it sounds like just being prepared, trusting your training, and then really being in the moment and enjoying the moment when you're out there, and not overly stressing it.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of great resources on ultra running and strength training on our channel. We did a great video with a good coach friend of ours, Alex Ho, who's raced Western States. Where can they go if they want to find that video and watch that?
They can just click right here to watch that video. He has some awesome tips in there. He is a veteran, I would say.
Yeah.
He is super inspirational to us. He's local, which we love. Check that video out.
All right, guys. See you later.